The office was nearly empty when Eleanor Hayes noticed the first irregular line of numbers. The kind that shouldn't exist, even in a messy quarter. A contract inflated beyond logic appeared in her report like a silent warning. Lights flickered above her desk, humming in the cold air. Someone had tampered with the system, and they thought no one would see. Eleanor kept scrolling, pulse tightening with every discrepancy. Payments signed by the CFO himself appeared out of nowhere. Controls were shut off, as if someone had quietly cut the brakes. She marked each anomaly, careful, methodical, unseen. But the walls had ears, and someone was always watching. The next morning, her desk was gone, replaced by a chair beside the copy machine. A demotion disguised as a joke. A warning disguised as kindness. Yet from that corner, she saw everything they tried to hide. And the truth began to sharpen its teeth. Eleanor spent the next week buried in spreadsheets that seemed to shift every time she blinked. Numbers behaved like living things, crawling into patterns that made no sense. A vendor contract showed a price triple the industry standard. The justification section was empty, as if someone deleted it with intent. She flagged it quietly, her fingers trembling only once. Then she checked travel expenses and felt her stomach sink. A senior manager claimed a trip to Denver. During a week, he was seen in the office. Receipts were scanned poorly, edges cut off like someone rushed the job. She searched deeper and found more anomalies waiting like traps. Multiple payments had been pushed through manually by CFO Grant Ellison. They bypassed the automated approval system completely. It was as if he wanted no digital trail except his own signature. Eleanor printed a few pages and held them against the window light. Ink thickness differed, subtle but wrong, as if altered after approval. She noted every discovery in her private log, encrypted and offline. The tension around the office thickened each day she continued. People avoided her eyes, as if they sensed she was seeing too much. She overheard whispers about her being too thorough for her own good. But she kept going, pulling one thread after another. When the review meeting arrived, she walked in with calm steps. Victor Lang stared at her like a man expecting obedience. Miles smirked, as if the outcome was already written. Eleanor opened her report and spoke slowly, clearly, deliberately. She pointed to the inflated contracts and missing approvals. She showed the mismatched data in the ledger they all relied on. The room chilled the moment she mentioned the manual payments. Grant's jaw tightened, a twitch he tried to hide. Victor interrupted her with a measured tone that felt rehearsed. He said the numbers were strategic adjustments for the IPO transition. Miles claimed her analysis lacked business context and urgency. Eleanor held her ground, refusing to soften her findings. The air crackled with their irritation. Her calm only made them angrier. When she finished, the room fell into a long, heavy silence. Victor closed her file without looking at it. He said they appreciated her diligence, but needed team players. Grant added that the company couldn't afford internal disruptions. Miles leaned back and gave a smirk that felt like a warning. Eleanor realized they weren't surprised by her findings. They already knew. They just didn't expect her to see through their cover. As she left the room, she heard the door close a little too softly. A softness that felt like a threat instead of courtesy. She walked back to her new seat beside the copy machine. The hum of the machine filled the silence they tried to force on her. From that corner, she watched their shadows move across the glass walls. And she understood one thing with absolute clarity. This wasn't incompetence or oversight. It was a system built on deception. And she had just become its newest enemy. Eleanor spent the long weekend pretending to rest, while her mind worked like a locked engine. She packed her camera, a small recorder, and a notebook disguised as a planner. Every tool felt necessary now. On Friday evening, she noticed her stepfather Thomas leaving the house unusually dressed. A pressed shirt, polished shoes, and a nervous stiffness in his movement. She followed from a distance, keeping her headlights low. Thomas drove to a quiet bar on the edge of the city, where no one from his life ever went. He parked far from the entrance, as if afraid someone might see him. Eleanor waited until he stepped inside before entering through a side door. She kept to the shadows, watching him choose a booth in the corner. Minutes later, CFO Grant Ellison walked in with his coat collar raised. He didn't order a drink. He went straight to Thomas like a man expecting a transaction, not a conversation. Eleanor lifted her phone and recorded the moment the envelope slid across the table. Grant took it without hesitation, checking its contents briefly. Thomas looked around nervously, unaware someone had already caught everything. Eleanor captured every angle she safely could, heart thudding but steady. She left before they noticed her, moving through the cold night with shaking hands. Back home, she locked her room and transferred the footage to an encrypted drive. Then she opened the stack of financial documents she brought from work. The deeper she dug, the darker the pattern became. Invoices repeated with different dates, but the same serial numbers. Vendors were registered under shell corporations with no real offices. Some addresses pointed to abandoned buildings with broken windows. The dollar amounts reached into tens of millions. Money shifted quietly through layers of accounts that didn't belong to Glasswood. Each movement felt like a fingerprint of a crime no one expected her to uncover. She traced emails Grant had archived, but never deleted fully. Phrases like "adjust before review" and "clean the trail" appeared more than once. Eleanor took screenshots and tagged each file with timestamps. Her folder grew into a living map of corruption and danger. She built a timeline showing when the controls were disabled and who benefited. Names repeated often, always the same circle of power. Victor, Grant, Miles, and 2 senior managers now looked inseparable in the scheme. Eleanor typed quietly as the night stretched into morning. She added the footage of Thomas meeting Grant to tie the personal and corporate threads. A knot tightened in her chest as she realized her family was part of the fraud machine. But she kept documenting, refusing to let fear erase the truth. On Sunday, she organized all evidence into an encrypted binder with layered passwords. Inside were emails, altered ledgers, video clips, voice notes, and her handwritten logs. It felt like holding a bomb. Yet it also felt like holding clarity for the first time. By Monday morning, she wasn't just suspicious. She knew the scale, the structure, and the danger of the network she had uncovered. And she understood that once she stepped into the office, there would be no turning back. Monday morning, Eleanor arrived at the office to find a note on her desk. It was typed, polite and terrifying all at once. "Consider your options carefully," it said. She ignored it and went to her corner by the copy machine. Her phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. A voice warned her to accept a severance package or face unintended consequences. She hung up without a word, feeling the tension coil tighter. Emails followed, all marked urgent, all empty of content but heavy in tone. "Your performance is under review," one subject line read. The office seemed quieter than usual, as if the walls themselves were watching. Colleagues avoided eye contact, whispers ceasing whenever she passed. Meetings she used to attend no longer included her. She was invisible and exposed simultaneously. Security cameras seemed to follow her movements, subtle tilts and pans catching her glance. One afternoon, she noticed a familiar car parked outside for hours. She recorded its plate, guessing it would matter later. Her computer was randomly locked several times a day. Files she needed vanished or were moved, forcing her to retrace steps. She realized every tactic was designed to isolate her. Grant Ellison called her into his office under the guise of a status check. He spoke slowly, deliberately, implying incompetence without saying it. Victor Lang joined on speaker, congratulating her on stress resilience, but questioning her judgment. Miles smirked in the background, leaning back with arms crossed. Every word was carefully chosen to make her doubt herself. She nodded politely, recording the conversation secretly with a small device in her pocket. Later, she drafted an internal complaint detailing harassment and threats. She encrypted it and saved it offline, ready to send if needed. The company's HR sent her another email, suggesting a meeting to discuss her future. Eleanor knew the only discussion possible was one of control and retaliation. Every step she took, they mirrored, predicting reactions, manipulating perception. She stopped walking alone through hallways, always keeping doors in view. She documented each encounter, every call, every email with meticulous timestamps. Even small gestures, like a cup placed on her desk, were recorded. She realized the stakes were higher than just her job. Her career, her safety, and the evidence she held were all intertwined. Late nights became routine, reviewing logs, analyzing patterns, securing backups. She rehearsed conversations she might have to disclose to authorities. She began to see connections she hadn't noticed before, a web of complicity stretching to executives and family alike. Fear coexisted with determination, a constant hum in her chest. One evening, she stared at the binder of evidence, understanding its weight. It could ruin careers, bring arrests, and dismantle a corporation built on deceit. Her role had shifted from observer to target, from analyst to whistleblower. Eleanor felt the pressure, the isolation, and the looming threat of retaliation. But she also felt clarity, the sharp focus of someone who had seen the machinery of corruption. She would not back down. Every call, email, and silent watch was a chance to prepare. Every act of intimidation strengthened her resolve. By the end of the week, she knew the company's next move. And she would be ready. Eleanor knew she couldn't fight alone anymore. She reached out to Ethan Monroe, a major investor quietly observing Glasswood Capital. He agreed to meet her in a neutral cafe downtown. She arrived early, carrying only her encrypted binder and a calm expression. Ethan greeted her with a firm handshake and a scrutinizing glance. He asked few questions, letting her lay out the evidence carefully. She showed him the contracts, altered invoices, and recordings of secret meetings. Every page, every screenshot, and every video clip was explained with precision. Ethan listened without interruption, nodding occasionally. When she finished, he leaned back and studied her silently. "You have everything," he said finally. "Don't accept severance. Let them fire you. It will prove intent." Eleanor understood immediately. By rejecting a payout, she could turn their manipulation against them. He introduced her to a legal team experienced in whistleblower cases. They outlined protections and steps to submit evidence securely to authorities. She absorbed every instruction, committing it to memory. Ethan emphasized timing and discretion. The moment she acted would define the entire operation. Returning to her apartment, Eleanor felt a mix of dread and empowerment. She prepared a secondary copy of her binder, stored in a hidden location. She encrypted messages to trusted colleagues, warning them to be cautious. Every move had to be precise, every detail accounted for. The next day, the office felt suffocating, more than usual. Colleagues glanced nervously as she passed. She sensed that upper management suspected she had found leverage. Grant Ellison called her into his office, his tone sharper than before. Victor Lang joined the call, this time seated in the same room, eyes cold. Eleanor listened as they used polite words to mask threats. They offered a restructured position and repeated severance, knowing she would refuse. She nodded, feigning consideration, and left the office with a measured step. Back at her corner, she updated her logs with timestamps from the meeting. She wrote every detail, knowing it could serve as proof of retaliation. She rehearsed conversations she might need in hearings. Each scenario was meticulously analyzed, every word anticipated. By midweek, she was ready to escalate. Eleanor drafted a formal submission for the SEC, carefully removing any identifying traces. She prepared a press-ready summary, highlighting the scale of corruption. Her legal team reviewed everything, confirming the timing was right. Then came the day of the official confrontation. Eleanor was summoned for a meeting that was supposed to feel like termination. She entered the boardroom, binder in hand, poised and composed. Victor and Grant were there, Miles smirking in the corner. They expected fear, uncertainty, or compromise. Instead, Eleanor held the evidence and the strategy she had built for weeks. Every word, gesture, and document worked as a countermeasure. She was no longer the silent observer or the isolated employee. She was ready for the confrontation they thought would end her. And in that moment, the power had shifted. Eleanor understood the fight was public now, and she would not back down. Her steps, her voice, and her evidence would expose the corruption completely. The room, once a cage, had become her platform, and the battle for truth had officially begun. The morning after Eleanor submitted her evidence, the office was unusually silent. SEC agents arrived unannounced, filing into the lobby with serious expressions. FBI followed shortly, their presence sending a ripple of panic through the staff. Phones rang constantly, unanswered, as rumors spread like wildfire. Victor Lang and Grant Ellison were called into separate questioning rooms. Miles attempted to maintain composure, but his smirk faltered under scrutiny. News spread quickly within the company. Glasswood Capital trading was halted immediately. Employees gathered in small groups, whispering about arrests and impending investigations. Thomas Miller, Eleanor's stepfather, was summoned as a person of interest. Some employees turned in internal documents they had hidden for years. A network of complicity began to unravel almost instantly. Eleanor watched quietly from her corner, binder secured, heart pounding. She received messages from former colleagues, thanking her for taking the risk. 4 former employees, fired unjustly months prior, returned with information. Together, they formed what Eleanor called the Glasswood Five. Every new testimony strengthened the case, painting a complete picture of fraud. The SEC analyzed emails, ledgers, and recordings Eleanor had meticulously prepared. Grant and Victor faced charges of financial misconduct and obstruction of justice. The company froze assets linked to suspicious transactions. Every branch office received audits they could not anticipate. Thomas Miller was named in the investigation for his role in secret meetings. Staff morale crashed. Some fled, others cooperated fully with authorities. Media outlets began covering the story, framing Eleanor as a whistleblower hero. Interviews with former employees painted a picture of intimidation and systemic fraud. The boardroom that once held power now stood empty, echoing with silence. Legal proceedings moved quickly, with arrests and hearings dominating headlines. Eleanor maintained contact with the Glasswood Five, coordinating testimony schedules. Each deposition revealed another layer of the complex corruption network. She documented every interaction, anticipating cross-examinations and counterclaims. Grant and Victor's defense weakened as evidence stacked beyond repair. The company's structure, once untouchable, began to crumble visibly. Employees previously complicit were granted leniency in exchange for full cooperation. Financial markets reacted sharply, reflecting the shockwave from the scandal. By the end of the first month, the leadership team had been completely removed. Glasswood Capital ceased operations, while authorities assessed remaining liabilities. The SEC and DOJ prepared reports detailing millions of dollars misappropriated. Public perception shifted entirely toward trust in whistleblowers over executives. Eleanor was credited as the key architect of uncovering the fraud. The Glasswood Five became recognized witnesses in legal filings nationwide. The network that once seemed untouchable was fully exposed. Eleanor finally allowed herself a moment of relief, knowing the risk paid off. She had not only survived, but changed the course of corporate justice. The battle was far from over, but the scales of accountability had clearly tipped. And for the first time, Eleanor felt the full weight of victory in her hands. After the Glasswood scandal, Eleanor felt an emptiness she hadn't expected. She returned home and faced her mother, the conversation long overdue. Words that had been left unsaid for years finally spilled into the open. She cut ties with toxic family influences that had haunted her since childhood. The silence afterward was heavy but necessary. Therapy became a daily routine, a space to untangle trauma from courage. She revisited memories she had buried, confronting fear and betrayal. Each session chipped away at the anxiety that had followed her for years. Eleanor began journaling again, documenting thoughts instead of financial ledgers. Sleep came easier, though shadows of the past lingered at night. Calls and emails from recruiters flooded in, offering opportunities she never imagined. She declined many, seeking a role where integrity mattered above all else. Harwick Financial extended an offer she could not refuse. She accepted the position as Director of Forensic Auditing, a perfect fit. Her office was quiet, but her influence profound. Every decision reflected lessons learned from Glasswood Capital. Colleagues admired her resilience and meticulous approach. She mentored junior analysts, teaching them to question, verify, and document. The media continued to cover her story, calling her a symbol of whistleblower courage. She never sought fame, but she accepted responsibility for inspiring others. Recognition came in the form of awards and speaking engagements. She shared her experience with corporations and universities alike. Her lectures emphasized the importance of evidence and moral courage. Every story she told reinforced the principle that truth could withstand pressure. She reconnected with the Glasswood Five, now friends and allies for life. Together, they supported each other through the aftermath of the investigation. Eleanor took long walks to reflect on how far she had come. The city's skyline reminded her of nights spent alone, gathering proof in secret. She allowed herself small pleasures she had denied during the crisis. Books, music, and long drives became meditative escapes from tension. She planned vacations that were not dictated by schedules or threats. Her confidence grew, rooted not in victories but in surviving the ordeal. She cultivated a network of professionals who valued ethics over profit. Eleanor understood that rebuilding trust took time, patience, and consistency. She kept her evidence files secure, ready to assist authorities if needed. Every action reinforced her principle: never compromise on integrity. She felt pride not in the downfall of others, but in the strength to act. Her story became a guide for future whistleblowers navigating corporate corruption. Eleanor no longer feared power. She respected it and approached it cautiously. Her life shifted from reaction to intention, from survival to leadership. She embraced the balance between vigilance and peace. Every day reminded her that the fight had changed her, but not defined her. Her mission was clear: protect the truth, support the vulnerable, and move forward. Eleanor finally felt whole, capable, and ready for whatever challenges awaited next. Eleanor boarded the plane, binder secure, ready for her next assignment. Her phone buzzed with a message from a young woman she didn't know. "I'm in the same situation you once were. What should I do?" Eleanor smiled faintly, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She typed back, simple and firm, "Document everything." The message sent, she leaned back, watching the clouds pass below. She reflected on years of fear, risk, and perseverance. Every moment of doubt had led to clarity and purpose. She knew power could move chairs, shuffle positions, and intimidate. But principles were immovable, anchored deep within. The plane ascended, carrying her toward a new investigation. Her mind mapped out strategies, contingencies, and evidence protocols. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a guide, a witness, a force. The young woman's message reminded her why she started this journey. To protect truth, to stand for integrity, and to inspire courage. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of responsibility. But it was a weight she had chosen and could carry. The city below shrank, a reminder of the world she had changed. Her story was no longer about fear. It was about action and impact. She opened her eyes, resolved and focused. The fight against corruption was ongoing, but she was ready. Eleanor smiled, knowing the next chapter had begun. And this time, she would lead the way.